to take all I've studied here and bring something together so that I get some insight on unto brotherly love. And then I was silent. I was waiting. And I got an idea. I got an idea. I will tell you what my idea was. I didn't preach it. It was so new and so fresh, and I'm so skeptical of my own subjectivity that I waited. And we'll let you put it back on me. But I think maybe what Peter is saying is everybody should become a believer with a view to joining a family, and never with a view to isolation. There is no becoming a believer and cleansing your heart unto independence. It is always unto philia. And then he shifts the word to agape in the next verse. Has a lot to do with evangelism. If you take that seriously. Having, by obedience to the truth, cleansed your heart unto Philadelphia, now love the brotherhood. Love each other earnestly from the heart. So back there, when you all became Christians, you became Christians unto a family. That's what it means to become a Christian. To join a family. Now, God gave me that in answer to prayer. It's probably in a book somewhere. I don't claim, but I'm using this to illustrate prayer. Waiting upon the Lord when you're stuck. He's never, I've been preaching in this pulpit for 13 years. I've never been without a message. And I've never been so stuck over a text that I couldn't find enough glorious truth in it to exult. In fact, we around Bethlehem right now have got this new phrase we like. I like it anyway. Called expository exaltation. That's my definition of preaching now. Expository exaltation. Just exulting in the stuff you turn up in Greek. And if you exult in it, your people will get excited about it. And it will be valuable to them if it's valuable to you. He struggled. He really struggled. He wrote to John Eliot, I do acknowledge unto you that I have a dry and barren spirit, and I do heartily beg your prayers that the Holy One would, notwithstanding all my sinful provocations, water me from above. So he pleaded for prayer. He didn't just pray himself. So I think the chief source of all of Owen's holiness was communion with God that has as its core assiduous meditation and prayer. Now let me close with the last one, number 4, quickly. Then we'll take just a few minutes for questions. Owen was authentic in commending in public only what he had experienced in private. Owen was authentic in commending in public only what he had experienced in private. Now, why do I think that's important enough to end on? As a pastor, the longer I preach, the easier words get for me. I am a word man now, after 13 years of preaching and 6 years of teaching before that. I'm a word man. Words are my trade. I minister by means of words, and they come relatively easy for me. That's dangerous. That's incredibly dangerous. Because you can start preaching on mystery without standing in awe. And you can preach on purity without feeling pure. And you can preach on zeal without spiritual passion. There can be, like, who said it this morning? Ray? There can be John Piper passion. That comes pretty natural. Without God passion. Probably only the old saints in the church see the difference at times. You can preach on God's holiness and not tremble. You can preach on sin without sorrow. You can preach on heaven without eagerness. And a terrible hardening moves into the life because you're so good with this thing called words. Which means if you're going to be holy, if you're going to have integrity in your life, you've got to find a way not to preach what you don't feel and experience. Now, let me just give you some illustrations of what he meant by that. He said, Our happiness consisteth not in knowing the things of the gospel, but in doing them. So doing what he learned was important. He wrote, I hold myself bound in conscience and in honor, not even to imagine I have attained a proper knowledge of any one article of truth, much less publish it, unless through the Holy Spirit I have had such a taste of it in its spiritual sense. That's what's missing from most of contemporary writing. They don't even know that distinction. Knowing something with a spiritual sense, knowing something just notionally. Now I've lost this awful sentence. Taste of it in a spiritual sense, that I may be able from the heart to say with the psalmist, I have believed and therefore I spoke. In other words, I'm not going to preach anything that I haven't spiritually tasted. Well, now that produces authenticity. If you can pull that off, there's authenticity. In his exposition of Psalm 130, 8 verses, 320 pages on those verses, Andrew Thompson says, when Owen laid open the book of God, he laid open the same time the book of his own heart and of his own history, and produced a book which in rich golden thoughts is instinct with the living experience of one who spake what he knew and testified what he had seen. He preached to his own heart, and then he preached to his congregation. This is what he wrote. A man preacheth that sermon well unto others, which preacheth itself to his own soul. And he that doth not feed on and thrive in the digestion of the food which he provides for others will scarce make it savory unto them. Yea, he knows not but the food he hath provided may be poison, unless he hath freely tasted of it himself. If the word do not dwell with power in us, it will not pass with power from us. And so he was authentic through and through when he spoke. His heart, as he says, was cast into the mold of the doctrine that he spoke. So let me close with this key sentence. When the heart is cast into the mold of the doctrine that the mind embraces, when the evidence and necessity of the truth abides in us, when not the sense of the words only in our heads, but the sense of the thing abides in our hearts, when we have communion with God in the doctrine we contend for, then we shall be garrisoned by the grace of God against all the assaults of men. When I read that, I thought, there's the key. There's the key to his life. Surrounded by academic pressure, political pressure, ecclesiastical pressure, family pressure. And he says, when we have communion with God in the doctrine we contend for, then we are garrisoned about against the assaults of men. At the end of his life, oh, Brother Payne, the long-wished-for day is come at last, in which I shall see the glory in another manner than I have ever done or was capable of doing in this world. And he saw it. The primary lesson I get from this survey is that in all of our enterprises and in all of our projects, the primary goal for us in ministry should be the display of God's glory in our own personal holiness. And the indispensable means of that holiness is the cultivation of personal, deep, authentic communion with God. And what that means in full, I leave to you to investigate in his books, Communion with God and The Glories of Christ and the others. So I'm going to stop here and take 10 minutes for questions and then dismiss you at 3:30. If you need to go, I understand you can walk out. But I might have told you all I know, but I'll try to answer some questions. The question is there anybody writing commentaries nowadays that that do help me.